Hey friends, I hope your week is off to a great start. Today I'm going to be testing out Rick Martinez's recipe for Chewy Ginger-Rye Cookies from the December issue of Bon Appetit. So I'm really excited to test this recipe out today for two reasons. So first, I'm just a big fan of ginger cookies in general, and last year I shared my favorite recipe for a gingerbread cutout cookie, and the flavor profile here sounds somewhat similar but with some unexpected twists. And second, I bought this big bag of rye flour to make the pecan rye pumpkin pie last month, and so I've been looking for recipes to use that up. So I'm excited to see the ingredient repeated here. I do these Bon Appetit recipe tests every single Wednesday, so if you like this one, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and click subscribe. Without any further ado, let's get into this. So the first step I'm going to do is actually chopping up my crystallized ginger. If you can't find this in the grocery store, you can 100% find this on Amazon. It's basically just super sugary candied ginger. And the recipe says to finely chop the crystallized ginger. It doesn't give any sort of approximation of size, so I'm not really sure how fine to go. However, smaller than a raisin would be a good jumping off point, though I suspect even smaller may be better. And when you're cutting up sticky foods, a really great tip is to sprinkle a little bit of flour on them. That way, as you cut, the sticky sides will get coated with just a fine dusting of flour, and it'll prevent everything from sticking together. The amount of flour that you're using is really, inconsequential to the entire recipe, so don't be worried about over flouring the recipe here. We're using, just a small pinch. So you can see here I've got an array of sizes, but in general they are quite small. I think that these will distribute really nicely throughout the cookie dough. So next I'm just going to add this chopped crystallized ginger into our dry ingredients. AP flour, kosher salt, baking soda, cinnamon, ginger, and rye flour. And so I'm just going to scrape this in on top, and we'll just whisk this to get it evenly incorporated. So we're going to set this aside and work on the wet ingredients. The list of wet ingredients is pretty brief. I've got some dark brown sugar here. To that, I'm going to add some melted unsalted butter, as well as some dark, robust flavored molasses. And you want to do this in a large bowl because we're going to add the dry ingredients to the wet, and we'll do all of the mixing in this bowl. So use something a little bit bigger than you think you need. And we're just whisking this to get everything evenly incorporated. We're not trying to aerate the mixture. We're not whipping it. We're not trying to lighten it in color at all, so really just mixing until there are no more streaks in here. And I think this looks nice. I don't see any lumps. I don't see any ring of unincorporated butter around the perimeter. Now we can add in our 2 egg yolks. We don't need the whites for this recipe, so you can save those for an omelet or some other recipe that you're working on. And we'll whisk this just to get the egg yolks incorporated. Okay, that looks good to me. I don't see any egg yolk streaks in here at all. With the wet ingredients looking totally homogeneous, we can go ahead and add the dry ingredients to them. So got the prepared dry ingredients. I'm going to just dump these on top. And then we're going to fold this to get everything incorporated. Going underneath and then back over the top. Every fold or so, I'm going to rotate the bowl just slightly to ensure that I'm evenly incorporating this and not overworking any one spot. Ooh, the spices are smelling really nice here as they're starting to hydrate from the wet ingredients. Getting a hit of the ginger, and I'm liking it. And this looks nice and even to me. There are no unincorporated streaks of dry ingredients. So you can see that right now this is a really loose cookie dough. And so we're going to set this aside for 30 minutes. That'll give all of this time for the flour to kind of hydrate and be much stiffer. So while the cookie dough finishes hydrating, we can move on to making the streusel topping. So here in a small bowl, I've got rye flour, raw sugar, ground ginger, kosher salt, and I'm just going to whisk this to get it combined. And that looks nice and evenly incorporated, so I can grab my final 2 tablespoons of room temperature butter. And it says to just smash this through the dry ingredients. So I'm just using a fork. We'll see how this goes. And on second thought, I'm going to go in with my fingers and just kind of smush this and see if I can get it looking a little bit more incorporated and more like clumpy wet sand. And I'm liking this approach much better. I think it's getting the butter kind of smushed into all of that sugar. Cool. So you can see the texture here. It definitely seems kind of like wet sand. It's a little bit clumpy, and I think this will do a nice job coating the outside of the cookies when we're ready for that. So our dough's been hydrating for about 30 minutes now, and it's definitely firmed up quite a bit. So you can see this is much more like a normal cookie dough. It's still soft, but it's definitely holding its shape. The recipe says to use a 1-ounce measuring scoop, which is about 2 tablespoons. I've got a 1.5 tablespoon cookie scoop from OXO. This is their medium cookie scoop. So I'm gonna use this, it'll be close enough. I use this for chocolate chip cookies all the time, and it's a really nice sized cookie. So I'm just gonna scoop in here, and then working one at a time, we're supposed to roll it into a little bit of a ball, And the dough really is sticky enough that I'm not really having to fight to get the streusel to stick onto it. So I'm going to pop this first tray of cookies into my preheated 375-degree oven until the cookies spread are starting to look a little bit crackly and the streusel on top is looking nice and brown. The first tray of cookies was in the oven for exactly 9 minutes, and you can see they've really spread out nicely. The streusel is still present on the surface. The cookies look a little bit crispy and dry around the edges, but I think the centers look nice and chewy still. So a few of them have joined forces, but I think that's totally fine. I'm gonna let these cool on the tray for about 10 minutes. They are down to room temperature, and this is the end result. So you can see that the cookie spread out nicely. It's got a cute, short little profile. There's definitely a visible presence of that streusel topping on both the top and the back side of the cookie. So I'm really happy with kind of the aesthetic of this. I don't think there's quite as much streusel presence as what the BA picture showed, but it's definitely still noticeable here. Texture overall looks like this is going to be a very chewy cookie. So break that apart here. You can definitely smell the ginger in the cookie here. In the cookie dough, molasses was by far the most dominant fragrance, so I'm curious to see what the taste of this is like. Let's see. Nice crispy edge, very chewy center. Not getting a ton of ginger. Oh, there it is. A little bit of heat from the ginger, so I think that's the dried powdered ginger that I'm tasting there. It's not the chewy candied ginger. Like the streusel topping, it gives a nice crispy and crunchiness to the cookie, in addition to the crispy edges that we're already having, so that's great. So obviously, I mean, this is a tasty cookie. I'm continuing to eat it. I'm underwhelmed by the amount of ginger in this cookie. It's called a ginger-rye cookie. I'm tasting more of a molasses ginger cookie. The ginger is almost like a secondary flavor in here, so that's just a little bit surprising and not what I expected based on the name. If you're in the market for a ginger cookie, I don't think that this is right for you. If you're in the market for a molasses cookie or you're kind of open to cookie flavors, this is a great option. I would definitely recommend it to you. So just have the right expectation going into this recipe and I don't think you'll be disappointed. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and click subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.